7:30. So we'll get Facebook going, and then we're ready to go when you are.
Okay.
You're live.
Great. It is 7:30, and I'm going to call this Transportation Policy Board meeting to order on Wednesday, January 10th, 2024. And we'll get started with some introductions. Mark.
Why don't we start with you, Chair? City of Lacey.
Andy Ryder, Mayor of Lacey, and I'm your chair.
And City of Olympia.
Hey everybody, Danny Madrone with the Olympia City Council.
Thurston County.
Wayne Fournier, Thurston County Commissioner.
City of Rainier.
Ron Kemp, City of Rainier, Council position.
City of Tenino.
John O'Callaghan representing the great city of Tenino.
Intercity Transit.
Intercity Transit, Justin Belk on the ITA.
And Washington State Department of Transportation.
Good morning, Guy Sonoy, Olympic Region.
And Business Representative Radcliffe Sinclair.
Good morning, Renee Radcliffe Sinclair, Business Rep, TVW.
And Business Representative Wasson.
Dave Wasson, Business Representative, Dancing Goats Coffee.
Our Emeritus Representative.
Well, good morning, everyone. This is Pete Komet.
And Community Representative Millar.
Howdy, Travis Millar, Community Rep.
All right, I'm scanning to see if anyone else came on while I was going through those. I think that is everyone on the policy board. And before I hand it over to Katrina to do the staff introductions, I want to take a little bit of privilege to do one myself. At our last meeting, we had an opportunity to say thank you to Dave Reed, who has been a long, he was celebrating 30 years with TRPC. And Dave is planning to retire early this first quarter of 2024. And so we already have Dave's replacement on board, Max Franklin. Max is coming to us from City of Shelton, and he's also worked for the Association of Washington Cities. Really excited to have Max on board. I think he's going to do a great job. And also one of the things that we noted in the interviews is he really cares about the work that we're doing, which is something that we really want in, because Dave Reed cares deeply about the work that we do. And so Max is on your screen, and Max, if you just say hello so everyone gets a chance to see you.
Nice to meet everyone. Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. And now I'll turn it over to Katrina to do the rest of the staff introductions.
Good morning. In addition to Mark and Max and myself, we have Allison Osterberg, Berlina Lucas, Dorinda Merrill, Theresa Julius, Dave Reed, and Paul Brewster. From the Thurston County, we have Becky Kahn and Brian Meyer. From Intercity Transit, Jonathan Yee, Jessica Gold, and Emily Bergkamp. From WashDOT, we have Anna Ragaza Barasa. And from Lacey, Martin Hoppy. And from the City of Olympia, Joey Jones and Michelle Swanson. And I think I got everyone, but if I missed anyone, please feel free to speak up and introduce yourself.
And Chair, I'll note that Community Representative Michelle Murray has also joined. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning. Okay, do you have any announcements, Mark?
I've just got one announcement for today. Good news, we had applied for a regional safety plan grant from federal funds. A new program called Safe Streets for All. This is a planning grant to tie together some of our jurisdictions, like City of Lacey, Thurston County, are doing individual safety plans through this program. And the Federal Highway Administration is encouraging that areas also look at tying those together through a regional safety plan. And so we applied for funds to do that, 332,000 and change. It'll be taking place over the next probably we'll get it started probably in mid to late 2024, and it'll go through 2026, so a couple of years to get this done. And obviously it'll be helpful in helping to improve how we're looking at safety across the region. But also one of the reasons to do this is it does make you eligible for some federal funds that you need to have one of these plans in place to get those federal funds. So very good news that we got that grant.
Great.
Thanks, Chair.
With that, can I get a motion to approve today's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor of that motion, signify by saying aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Then that motion unanimously carries. Next up is, can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar, the meeting notes from December 13th?
So moved.
Second, Pete.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion there? And seeing none, all in favor of that motion, signify by saying aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? That motion unanimously carries as well. We have approved the consent calendar. Next up is public comments. We haven't received any public comments. I don't think anyone signed up today. So we'll go into our next agenda item, which is our 2024 meeting schedule. Trina.
Good morning. And I don't really have a presentation for this. I'm happy to put up the calendar that is in your packet, but this is fairly straightforward. So the transportation policy bylaws call for adoption of the annual meeting schedule and at your January meeting. And in 2023, the TPP chose to reduce trips and vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gases for board members, staff, and the public by meeting remotely with a hybrid option. For those that are meeting in person, that location is here at TRPC's offices. TPP officers suggest that 2 meetings this year be in person to encourage participation. The first when the call for projects process is introduced, and the second when proposed projects are reviewed. The specific months that those 2 agenda items will occur has not yet been established. So the TPP regular meets, as you know, on the second Wednesday of each month from 7:30 to 9 a.m. And depending on the agenda, the board may also hold an extended meeting. So the TPP has generally elected to take a hiatus in August, and that's consistent with council's practice. So again, in your packet, there is an attached draft schedule that has no meeting in August. We didn't have to change any dates based on calendar holidays, so it's fairly straightforward. I'm happy to put that up if you would like to see it, but if you have it in your packet, there aren't any changes to it.
Is there any discussion? Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ron seconded. Is there any discussion? So I think at the very least we're going to have the 2 in-person meetings, and I'm glad we're spelling it out here. There may be other times that throughout this year where we might want to meet in person, and this is kind of a big year coming up because we have tasked TRPC and to come up with a new maintenance plan for our trails, and with a set aside for that. That's going to take a little bit of discussion, and I hope all that goes smoothly. But sometimes when you're introducing a big new project or big new idea, it's better to sit across from your colleagues and discuss it. So it's good that we have this hybrid format. I'm just saying there may be times where we want to meet in person if it gets down to it. And so we're going to leave that open, open for discussion. And I think anytime an issue comes up, we may want to, if possible, meet in person to discuss a major issue like that. With that, is there any other discussion?
I've got my hand up.
Okay, Danny.
Yeah, I just, in-person meetings, I think occasionally are a good idea, but we have to maintain the ability to come in hybrid for those who can't make it in for whatever reason, or, COVID is still a thing. If somebody is sick and unable to be in person, but could still attend a meeting virtually. So I just wanted to assert that. Also, when in-person meetings are happening, I think I would ask staff to not be shy with reminders for when those are occurring, because we're all in our routines, and I think it would be very easy for somebody to log in on a Wednesday morning that they're expected to be in person and they're not, and just because of the routine. And so, like, reminders at the meeting before isn't enough. It's got to be emails and stuff like that too.
Agree. Okay. That I don't see anyone else's hands up. So all in favor of setting our meeting dates and time for our 2024 Transportation Policy Board meetings, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there anyone opposed? And that motion carries. I did see, Dave, you raised your hand there at the last second. Did you have something you wanted to say?
I think that was his vote.
Okay. Okay. And on to our next agenda item, which is our 2024 election of officers process. Back to Katrina.
Good morning. So the DPB bylaws provide for an annual election of officers for the chair, the vice chair, and the second vice chair at your February meeting. So this allows time for member organizations to appoint their 2024 TPB members prior to the election. The roles, the chair presides at all meetings, coordinates with TRPC staff to set agendas, calls special meetings, sets the meeting time and place in consultation with membership, establishes committees as needed, and represents TPB before other groups. The vice chair assumes, and the second vice chair assume these duties when the chair is unable to, or the vice chair is unable to. All voting members of the TPB are eligible to serve as officers, and the bylaws do not set term limits nor require nominations in advance of the February meeting. That said, bylaws do not prohibit those advance nominations, and staff encourages that if you do have an advance nomination, to please help support the elections process by putting those forward. You can submit those in advance to Berlina Lucas, and you should have her email. If not, we can get that to you. But please have those to Berlina by Wednesday, January 31st. So you have a few weeks to think about this. And then at this meeting, the current officers will go ahead and notify the board if they would like to continue serving in their current role. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Andy.
Okay.
And the rest of the board or the leadership.
Danny, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to note something that I didn't hear you say, Katrina, which are the monthly agenda setting meetings that we've done. I don't know if that's like, if you were reading from the bylaws and that's not written in there, which maybe it should be written in there. But that's something that we've been doing at least the past couple of years, is having the chair, vice chair, and second vice chair monthly meet with staff around the agenda, how the flow of the meeting will go, and also to talk about some of like the sticky things that might come up. So just wanted to note that as well.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm opening it up. I have obviously been the chair of Transportation Policy Board for a while. I would like to continue to be your chair. This has really been my focus for quite a long time. I have a couple years left on this term, and I won't be running again most likely after this. So, but I've always appreciated being the chair of Transportation Policy Board. It's my focus for a long time, I'd like to continue. I know Danny has shown some interest in the chair position as well in leadership. And so if there's anyone else, wishing to be in leadership, please either let Berlina know, or you can also reach out to any of the current officers and talk to them about the roles and responsibilities.
Well, and I'll just speak for myself here. I don't plan to continue on the Transportation Policy Board. So I'm not interested in any of the leadership positions coming up. We make those decisions as a council this weekend, but I'm not going to put myself in to continue to serve on TPB. But I would encourage the group to think about succession, and cultivating leadership within the group. Andy, if you're going for another 2 years and people are cycling through, thinking about what happens in the future is probably a good idea.
Yep. We obviously will need a first vice chair with Danny no longer being on TPB. So please think about that, and we will, because we'll have to have nominations next month for that. So if you're interested, please reach out to us. I know that Renee said that she'll continue, and so we just need one other leadership position on TPB. Okay, you want to add anything, Mark?
Yeah, I'll just make a plug. So I hope that we have someone that's interested in stepping into that vice chair role. As Member Madrone said, we do meet monthly on the agenda, and it's a good opportunity to get to know our work a little better than just at these meetings. I value that chance to meet with our officers and talk through some of the sticky issues and figure out how we're going to address them at the meetings and such. And so it really is a nice opportunity to get to know TRPC better. So look forward to someone stepping up and into that vice chair or second vice chair role, depending on. I don't know, Renee, if you're. I don't know that it matters whether it's first or second vice chair necessarily. But if you have any more questions, please let the chair know. And also I can help answer questions on what it means to be a vice chair as well.
Okay. Danny, do you know who's going to replace you?
We have our retreat this weekend. But we do have a new member of the city council that we appointed this week who is very keen on transportation issues. So I don't want to get ahead of the council in terms of the decisions that we make together, but we'll know Saturday.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go on. Our next agenda item is the proposed amendments to the 2024-2027 RTIP.
So good morning. I'm Theresa Julius, and I'm a transportation modeler and planner here at TRPC, and happy 2024. This is the way we started our RTIP amendments. This agenda item is to review proposed amendments to the 2024-2027 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, and that's the RTIP. So just a reminder, the RTIP is a 4-year list of near-term transportation projects, which is updated annually. And so in between these updates, when new projects are added or substantial project changes are made, they go through an amendment process. The City of Olympia and Thurston County have requested amendments to the 2024-2027 RTIP for the following projects. So for City of Olympia, the Phones Road Transportation Improvement Project, there's a request for a funding adjustment. And Thurston County, their Tilley Road South, Old Highway 99 to Goddard Road Reconstruction Project is a request for adjustments in the project scope, title, and just to secure the funds. And their Green Cove Fish Patches Barrier Removal Phase 1 Culvert Replacement, a request for adjustments for the project title, scope, and to secure the funds. And then in addition, the Green Cove Fish Barrier Removal Phase 2 Planning Project, it's a request to add this as a new project to the RTIP. There was more detailed information that was in your packet on these. So in order in order for funds to be released, amendments must be made to the RTIP, and they will be forwarded to the State Transportation Improvement Program. That's the STIP. These projects will go towards meeting our safety transportation measures in the RTIP. And we had put out a solicited public comment on our website, and we did not receive any. So are there any questions for amendments? We have both the city and county staff here if you do.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
This is a second from Pete.
It's been moved and seconded to amend the 2024 to 2027 RTIP to include the following project: the Thurston County Green Cove Creek Fish Barrier Removal Phase 2. Is there any other discussion? All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? And that motion carries. We have amended the RTIP, which is something that we do quite often, by the way. This comes up, quite often. As is explained, we have to have things in the RTIP for funding, and so we do this quite a bit when projects come up. So this is something that you'll see for the new members, that you'll see that we do quite periodically over the year. Okay, with that, we'll go to our next agenda item, which is the Unified Planning Work Program.
Hello, nice to see you all still. So I'm just gonna keep this really brief. So this is about amendments to the Unified Planning Work Program that was adopted back in June. So this is not the new Unified Planning Work Program, but this is the current one, and we are looking at amending it. So the UPWP describes how TRPC conducts its regional transportation work program. It must meet federal and state requirements, and it covers a major portion of TRPC's budget. So what triggered the need for an amendment? It really is all about the fact that we have received and secured $1.46 million in new project funding that is not currently represented as such in the UPWP. So 3 of these projects, the Freight Mobility Strategy, the Regional Multimodal Level of Service, and the Bicycle Connectivity Strategy, all of these we received redistributed funds for in September. And then just last month, we found out that we would receive $138,000 to work on VMT reduction issues. And so we are funneling that funding into our update of the Regional Transportation Plan. So that's our VMT work program. Some of the other changes that we're making during this time, since we've gotten rid of some of our unfunded needs, they're now funded and part of our work program moving forward. We have some unfunded needs that we've also identified. That includes an industrial land analysis. So this will build on that freight mobility strategy and examine zoning, designations, and inventorying industrial lands. It will also look at the inherent conflicts that exist between freight travel, parking, delivery, etc., and transit activity in the major centers and corridors of our region. The Regional Carbon Reduction Strategy, you may remember back in the summer, early summer, we talked about wanting to possibly do this with some of our carbon reduction program funding. Found out that was not an eligible activity for that funding. So this is what we're talking about. And so looking at the new guidance, requirements, and funding opportunities connecting climate, equity, transportation work at the state and federal level, we think that a regional carbon reduction strategy is needed to ensure TRPC's programs are aligned and that our partners are well supported to participate in these opportunities going forward. Regional Trails Work Program. So just back last month, you all made a recommendation and council adopted an update to the Regional Trails Plan. And as part of that, we had discussions about some of the things that TRPC are called on to take on an ownership of from that plan. And that is establishing a regional trails work group, work group, holding an annual meeting and more consistently updating the trails plan every 5 years. So these activities are not currently resourced at TRPC. And so this is a project that would fund that for a 5-year cycle. Last one is the regional multimodal level of service. So we talked about this already as having received funding. We are splitting this into 2 phases. The first phase is really all that background work and understanding what a regional multimodal level of service could look like, what are our options, what are our sources of information, et cetera. So the second half is really all about how do we get that from concept and understanding and options to actually adopted and making sense for our region. So the second half would be taking that through an adoption process. So those are the projects that we're looking at adding as unfunded needs to the UPWP. And then we are also looking at updating the revenue and expenditure tables in the UPWP to reflect that we actually have $226,000 more dollars than what we anticipated moving out of the last UPWP cycle, so state fiscal year 23. And then thank you to Pete Comet, who read through the proposed amendments. He found a typo. We are referring to him as the business emeritus rep, and he is simply just an emeritus rep. So we need to make that correction. So that was not reflected in your staff report, but again, thank you to Pete for actually finding that so that we can address it. So the process is today we are asking you to make a recommendation. This will go to council on Friday for their first review and then action on their consent agenda on February 1st. And with that, the requested action is to recommend council adopt the proposed amendments to the state fiscal year 2024 Unified Planning Work Program.
Okay, since you asked so nicely, I'll make the motion.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Pete.
So I do have a question regarding the trail plan. I brought this up with staff. I'm still not clear on this. This connectivity study, I understand in general what we're trying to accomplish here, which is look at things more than just the trails themselves. But as Andy mentioned, an important component of the regional trails plan is figuring out how we're going to continue to fund operations. There's an advisory committee that was supposed to be formed to talk about some of the issues that were raised in the plan. And I'm still not clear, are those activities going to go forward this year or not?
So at this stage, no, we do not have it in our work program or the budget to take on those responsibilities at this point in time. With the call for projects process, we are going to put forward a request for funding to do that, but it would probably, if it is chosen as a funding option, it would not start until state or 2025, possibly 2026. It just depends on, again, whether it's funded or not. The other part to that is we're also looking at putting a similar work program, 5-year work program, as a contingency project in the hope that in whether it's this year or next year, we can also get redistributed funds to fund that portion as well. In addition to that, we're also looking at other opportunities and options for funding. But currently, just based on our workload and the funding that's available, we can't start that work yet.
And I just want to add to this is something that I'm highlighting for council on Friday in association with our 2024 budget is we are increasingly year by year, we are more dependent on grant funds than we have been in the past. And so when with those grant funds, we've got very specific work products that we need to deliver. And so our discretionary funds, like the assessment dollars, those are used to match a lot of those federal grant and other grant funds. They're the only source we have for our IT infrastructure because we can't pay for capital improvements with any of the federal or state funds. And so increasingly, we are less able to just look at something new and say, we want to do it. We need to find the funding to do it because we have become very much dependent on those grant funds to keep us whole.
So I understand actually having a project up and going, but there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen to what it would look like to have a set aside to do the work. So you're saying we're not even at a point where we're going to have the conversations to come up with a program to look at a set aside?
Through the 2024 call for projects process, we will be talking about that set aside. Yes.
And so, but we're gonna have to probably have a subcommittee that meets and looks at what that proper amount needs to be. Are we going to do that, or are we just going to say we want some money off the top just to do the work for next year to come up with a plan?
It's a good question that I think I'll want to check in with our staff on how we're going to be able to handle that for this call for projects.
Mark, if I could just add, we are in the discussions right now with Paul about putting that framework together for what the call for projects process looks like, the touchstones with TPP and council, and looking at what those set aside options could be. So you will hear about that at future meetings, but that maintenance set aside or that trail project set aside that you have discussed as a policy board, that is something we'll talk about in the future. But for the work program that I'm talking about, those are about the activities that TRPC should take on, not necessarily the funding that should be distributed through the call for projects process to the jurisdictions for the maintenance and the trail projects themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I understand actually coming up with a whole maintenance plan, right, to figure out how we maintain our trails. That's a big ask. But I do think we need to set aside, have an idea of how much we need to set aside, what that plan looks like, and then have buy-in from the TPB that gets approved by TRPC that says this is what approximately a set aside will look like, going forward for our maintenance person. So they're two different things. But unless we start the conversations about what this plan is going to look like in the future, then we can't get to a funding strategy because we don't know how much we need to set aside from the call for projects. So there's a process here that we need to start at some point.
So Andy, this is Pete. I would encourage you as chair to try to sit down with Mark or lead staff on this and try and figure out a strategy to at least have a conversation about this. Maybe it's a special meeting of just the jurisdictions that have funding in this game. I don't know, but I do think for me, I'd be extremely disappointed if we didn't at least begin this discussion this year and try to move this plan forward. Invariably we pass these plans and then they sit on the shelf and nothing happens. And then here we are 5 years later, and again, we're updating the plan, but we've never really implemented the current plan. I understand that these grants are very specific and the regional trails work that is called for in here, you have to follow whatever you ask the money for. So I understand that, but I sure hope that we can, even if it's a fairly limited staff supported discussion, I do think there needs to be some policy discussion here on how we move these plans forward, because without it, they're just going to sit on the shelf and we'll be stuck again. And the network we got is getting big enough now that we do really need to, it's becoming, I think, an important element of our transportation plan. And I think it's important that we, elevate the resources to support it. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Well, Mark, we'll work on it. You know where I am at on this.
I have heard the desire loud and clear, and I appreciate it. And so let me also huddle back with staff and see what we can do.
Yeah. I know it's a big ask. I know it's a lot of work, and I know we need to have a lot of coordination with the jurisdictions to figure out how we maintain our trails and who's the lead. There's a whole deal. It's one thing coming up with funding to give someone, then someone's got to do the work. And so, who's going to do? Yeah, there's a lot to talk out. And so maybe we start with we'll work on it.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you for the feedback.
Okay. With that, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
This is Pete. I'll second. And again, just having the motion include the clarification of my role in the committee here. Thank you.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, one thing that I think is really important when we start talking about the maintenance of the trails is security as well. We've seen what's happened up north, and I definitely don't want to see something like that happening down here.
I know it's going to be a big discussion. That's why on all of our minds.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure at least that's been thrown out there so it becomes part of the discussion.
Okay, then we have a motion, a second, to adopt the proposed amendments for the fiscal year 2024 Unified Work Plan. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Then that motion carries, and we'll go on to our last agenda item, which is the Intercity Transit Zero Emissions Analysis.
Yes. Good morning, Chair Ryder and esteemed Transportation Policy Board members. It's an honor to join you today. In boxing terms, I am the undercard today with our Fleet and Facilities Maintenance Director, Jonathan Yee, is our main event. But before Jonathan presents Intercity Transit's Zero Emissions Analysis, I thought I'd take a few moments to introduce myself since I'm new to my role as Intercity Transit's General Manager. While I'm new to my role, I'm not new to Intercity Transit. I started my career at IT nearly 20 years ago as a van pool coordinator, and I've served in several other roles since then, such as youth education specialist, ILF manager, operations director, and interim general manager prior to being selected as the general manager. I'm a proud St. Martin's graduate, go Saints, and earned my master's degree in public administration from the University of Washington Evans School of Public Policy and Governance. Go Huskies, even though it was a tough week. But one of my proudest accomplishments working in transit was achieving my commercial driver's license to better understand the very intense process our drivers go through to work for our agency and serve our community. I'm also a regular transit passenger, riding routes 94, 68, 13, and 62 A and B, at least 1 to 2 times per week as my commute mode. I also want to say a special thank you to Justin Belk for his participation on the Transportation Policy Board. He is the Vice Chair of the Intercity Transit Authority. And also a special shout out to Travis Millar, who is a Bus Buddy volunteer with the Bus Buddy program, which is a partnership between Intercity Transit and Catholic Community Services. And for those of you who have access to our services, if you haven't ridden with us in a while, we'd love to welcome you back to enjoy your community's transit system. So Intercity Transit mission is to provide and promote transportation choices that support an accessible, sustainable, livable, healthy, and prosperous community. Examples of our transportation choices are our nearly 20 fixed routes serving Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater, and Yelm, as well as Thurston County. Our door-to-door dial-lift service for people with disabilities that prevent them from using our fixed route. We also have a robust van pool and carpool program, our workforce development program called Village Vans, our successful walk and roll youth education program, which educates and empowers people of all ages to walk, cycle, and ride transit, along with services like travel training and bus buddies, which teaches the practical skills of riding our buses and the support to do so safely and confidently. Intercity Transit's vision is to be a leading transit system in the country, recognized by our peers, community, and customers for our well-trained, highly motivated, customer-focused, community-minded employees which are committed to enhancing the quality of life for everyone in Thurston County. And a little bit about Intercity Transit's commitment to sustainability. Our looking at zero emissions and reducing our carbon footprint is not a new thing for Intercity Transit as an agency. We've had a long-held commitment to sustainability, and we're early adopters of biodiesel in the early 2000s. In fact, many of you probably remember that. We would often talk about if you followed our buses, you might smell French fries coming out the tailpipe. But since then, we've continued to seek out opportunities to lessen our environmental impact and greenhouse gas emissions, which Jonathan will share more about next. Public transportation is a cornerstone of community vitality, sustainability, and environmental stewardship. And Intercity Transit upholds these qualities through our commitment to sustainable practices, leadership principles, mobility, accessibility, and equity. An example of our commitment to mobility, accessibility, and equity was our Intercity Transit Authority Board approving a zero fare pilot in January of 2020, which essentially removed the barrier of fares to ensure anyone in our community can ride transit. Sustainability is integral to our daily practices and long-term objectives, and we believe sustainability must consider people, planet, and prosperity. So it's my distinct honor to introduce our main event. Fleet and Facilities Director Jonathan Yee joined Intercity Transit in July of 2019, where he has provided excellent leadership to all things maintenance and facilities and has also become our agency's subject matter expert in zero emissions technologies. Before his career at Intercity Transit, Jonathan worked at Pacific Gas and Electric, where he served as the Regional Fleet Operations Manager and the Parts and Inventory Manager for 8 years. Prior to that, he worked with the City of Sacramento as their Operations General Supervisor and their Fleet Asset and Procurement Manager. He also served in the California Army National Guard as a heavy vehicle mechanic and automotive worker and taught automotive department classes at the community college level. So without further ado, please welcome Jonathan Yee.
All right. Thank you, Emily. That was quite the introduction. I appreciate that. I'm excited to be here this morning to share with you kind of what we've been working on since I joined Intercity Transit in 2019. And I want to start with some background here. Let me get this working. Oops. Today, just 3 main topics in a series of slides. We'll talk about our journey towards zero emissions, which is a little bit of history, and what we've been looking at prior to today. A brief update on our project. We've been working with a group of consultants to do some analysis, feasibility analysis, and cost analysis and others to figure out what our path forward will be. And then we'll spend a few minutes talking about what our plans, our near-term and longer-term plans are in this effort. So before we dive into zero emissions, as Emily said, not only fuel choices, but also fleet replacement to current technology does help reduce emissions. And this is a view of a graphic that I've used for quite a while, in that, the old dirty diesels that you used to see going down the road with the plume of black coming out of the tailpipe, that used to really be the case. And the EPA federally has mandated, or had mandated, and continues to look at emissions reductions from manufacturers and engine design. And so in 2022, we completed, actually early 23, maybe, we completed the replacement of all of our 2010 and older diesel engines. And what that did was significantly, just through fleet replacement of old engines to new engines, significantly reduce emissions, primarily particulate matter and oxides of nitrogen in our community. And then the other thing, so to touch on the fuel choices, we did start using biodiesel in 2008. In 2020, as soon as renewable diesel became available, we chose to start a test with a 10% mix. So R10 is 10% renewable diesel and 90% ultra low sulfur or conventional diesel. And so this is a graphic showing, compared to the first line on the left being ultra low sulfur current diesel emissions factors, compared to some of the choices that the different fuels that we've used over the years. And I'm happy to say today, and beginning in January 2023, so we had a full year of renewable diesel use, we're already reducing some of the greenhouse gas emissions to the tune of about, for our diesel fleet-wide, all of our buses and all of our vehicles, about 3.3 million kilograms of CO2e per year that we've taken out just through the fuel choice. And then our dialift, as you may be aware, about a third of our fleet currently is propane powered. Some are still diesel and they're using the renewable, but the propane additionally is significantly or burns significantly cleaner than diesel. And so just in our dialift fleet, we have 19 vehicles currently on the road that are propane. We've reduced over 570,000 kilograms of CO2e in 2023 alone. And we're in the process of receiving 28 more propane dialifts. So beginning probably second quarter of 2024, all but 7 of our vehicles, our dialift vehicles, will be propane powered. So that reduction number will increase as we go forward. All right. Now, in 2019, one of the things that I started looking at was, what are we going to do for zero emissions? My predecessor had begun the work with a little bit of outreach. The decision prior to me getting here was to wait and let the technology kind of catch up. So I jumped in and redid some of that outreach, at least to the Washington Transit Association or transit agencies, to see how their zero emission deployments were going. The stories were not great. Some hadn't hit the road in years, and range wasn't what it needed to be. And so we shared with our board our direction, our recommendation was to wait and not jump in and spend money on technology that wasn't going to allow us to provide the service that we need to our community. But we didn't just wait. Our commitment was to get involved in the industry. So we joined several industry groups, both transit and vehicle technology, as well as charging and other alternative fuels, to see what else was out there, because we wanted to make sure we had a full understanding of all of our options, not just battery electric buses. Through that outreach, we found hydrogen, and became very interested in that. In 2021, we shared some information with the board, and I'll share a couple pieces of that with you here in a minute. And we began really diving in, and I still feel today hydrogen probably has a place in our fleet, and we're going to be testing that soon. And then in sharing what we had learned with the board, they had asked us to make sure that we had a full analysis, feasibility analysis, cost analysis, to figure out or to be able to make an informed decision on which path we're going to take going forward. So that scope was developed in 2021 through 22. We awarded the contract late 22 and began working with our consultants just before the end of the year in 22. And we've completed that initial phase, and now we're moving on. So a brief look back. This is a table of kind of a summary of key points that we learned from our outreach to other transits as well as the industry. We shared this with the board in October of 2021. So the two primary technologies for heavy duty buses that are available today on the market are battery electric and fuel cell electric. So these are a couple of key notes about their capabilities really, and some of the other things that come along with operating these vehicles in a fleet. The range is a bit different between the two battery electric buses. While we're seeing them get into the 200-mile range with some bigger batteries, there's always a trade-off because batteries are heavy. So the more batteries you have on board to get you the range, the less load, or for, in our case, passengers we can carry. So there's a fine balance there. The fuel cell electric buses that are on the road today with other transit agencies across the country and around the world are seeing, around the 300, 350 mile range. Fueling technology, obviously battery electric needs to be plugged in to charge. So there's a load on the electric system and time involved with completing those charges. Hydrogen, while still an electric vehicle with fuel or the fuel cell producing electricity to charge and drive the vehicle, can be refueled in a shorter amount of time. And some of my slide got cut off there. Capital cost wise, so for the buses themselves, both battery electric and fuel cell are more expensive than diesel buses, but fuel cell is still, even today, a little bit more than a battery electric bus. And then for fueling considerations, there is significant infrastructure either way. And I'll share a little chart and have some more conversation about that. But fueling considerations or energy need for battery electric is pretty significant. For fuel cell, if we're producing hydrogen, it is very significant. I'd say right on par with charging a full fleet of buses. But if we're able to get the fuel from someplace else, the local electrical demand is not the same. And it also allows us to have a different type of resiliency. And then so what we wanted to focus on as we delved into the feasibility analysis and looking at, what is the right technology for our fleet? These were our key considerations. We wanted to look at how green they are, but also the efficiency of the technology and the cost. We'd be obviously looking for funding outside of our local budget because of the additional costs that we would be incurring. We absolutely need to look at what the infrastructure requirements are and the space available, and where are we going to get the fuel for either option. Vehicle performance, obviously range is very important to us. We need to be able to provide the service that we do to our community. And what fits into our operations and our service to the community. And then how can we ensure that even in a natural disaster or emergency situation, we have the ability to operate the service that we provide that is critical to our community and to all of you. So as we awarded to our consultants and started down our feasibility analysis project, these were our two kind of main focus points, making sure that we're focused on providing transit services that meet the community needs and not rearranging how we perform that service based on the technology capabilities. And then whatever technologies we're looking at, and there are multiple, we want to make sure we're considering the full life cycle emissions of all those solutions. So how is the energy produced? How is it transported to us? And then how efficiently do we use it, and making sure we have zero emissions out of the tailpipe. So this is a brief overview of the project. We awarded to Center for Transportation and the Environment, or CTE, as the primary for the project. And they pulled in partners Nelson Nygaard and Hatch LTK to help with some of the pieces of this analysis. So first, we wanted to look at feasibility. We provided, some direction of what we wanted to look for. It was all defined in our RFP. Then we fed them all the data that they needed: fuel consumption, route information, a lot of data, so that they could start combing through it. And they began looking at, what our service looks like today, what it would look like with different technologies. The fleet assessment is, what it would take to replace cost-wise mostly. Fuel, looked at how much fuel we might need and where it would be available and how much it would cost and how efficient it is. And then, is there any difference in the maintenance aspects and or costs of operating these types of vehicles? And then looking at facilities, resiliency, redundancy, and finally ending up with total cost of ownership. This graphic shows, for those of you that may not be familiar, kind of a very basic layout of the two different types of vehicles we're looking at for our heavy duty buses. And the pieces and parts, whether it's a bus or a small passenger vehicle, are relatively the same on any. So there are some small fuel cell vehicles that are available on the market, but only where there's hydrogen available. And we'll see some, I believe, in Lewis County here in the next couple of years. But fuel cell or battery electric, let's start there, is basically a set of batteries or a large battery pack that provides the power or the electricity and the energy to drive the vehicle, and an electric motor or motors, depending on how the vehicle is set up. And it requires electricity to charge those batteries up. And as you drive, it depletes those batteries down to a certain point, and then needs to be recharged. And as I mentioned earlier, a fuel cell still has a battery on board, which drives the electric motor or motors. But the benefit and where we get the range is you also have hydrogen tanks on board that provide the hydrogen to a fuel cell, which provides a chemical reaction and creates electricity or transitions the energy from hydrogen and other molecules into electrical energy to charge the batteries. So you need fewer batteries on board to be able to go the same or longer range. So that is an overview of the two different technologies that we're looking at. This was an interesting graphic. We assumed that, based on our research, that our service model was not 100% feasible with a battery electric bus. And this is one of the early charts from our project with CTE that showed that through their route analysis, we looked at about 30%, really it was like 27 point something percent of our service, pre-COVID service levels, were feasible with a battery electric bus that charged at our Pattison base and tried to operate all day long. So the rest of our fleet, or the rest of our service, was not compatible with a battery electric bus in that format. So there would need to be some other way to get the additional energy needed, or vehicles with longer range. So this is, fast forward through all the analysis to the summary page. And on the left, you can see, and the numbers will support this a little bit. This is a chart that floats around the industry, specifically in transit, but also in others, in looking at what it takes to transition fleets to zero emissions. So for a battery electric bus, if you look at the curve, you can start relatively low cost and low effort, because it doesn't take much other than a little bit extra money to buy a few battery electric buses and install some chargers. But depending on the size of your fleet, the number of vehicles in your fleet, that the cost and the effort compounds pretty significantly the more vehicles that you're trying to support. Typically requires significant electrical system upgrades to the site and or the local grid to be able to support a large number of buses. And then on the flip side, fuel cell, it doesn't make a lot of sense when you're doing fuel cell buses or planning to deploy a fleet of fuel cell buses to scale the infrastructure. There's a significant investment to put in a fleet-sized fueling system for fuel cell or for hydrogen fuel cell buses, but then it's done kind of more on the front side of the project. And as you grow, as you increase the number of buses in your fleet, if you've planned it correctly, the costs and effort down the road are less. Think of if we were going from horse and carriage to diesel buses today, we would want to make sure that we had the 100,000 gallons of diesel in the ground and the capability to pump it on site that we do today before we started getting buses. And so the same as with fuel cell versus battery electric, you can scale it. So it's just a choice which way you want to go, which technology works for you, and how you want to implement the infrastructure. So based on our needs and a look at cost primarily here in this table of between now, 2023 and 2050, with really the 100% of our purchases or replacement purchases beginning in 2026 as full zero emissions. These are what the costs look like. So the first line is just the cost of the buses. And we started with the baseline. If we just continued to buy diesel buses at the end of this period, 2050, we would have spent about $270 million on buses. And you can see the different choices. So the BEB depot charging is that 30% feasibility that I talked about. That is if we were only charging here at our Pattison base and planning to run the buses all day and bringing them back and charging again. The next column over, BEB depot and on route charging, would involve charging when the buses are at our facility, but also deploying charging stations throughout the community along our service routes so that we could get the range that we needed to, or replenish those batteries as we go through our service day so that we could achieve our service. So I'll call your attention to the percent of blocks achievable down toward the bottom as well. In this whole view, today through 2050, with depot only charging, assuming battery technology is improving a small percentage every other year, everybody believes there's a cap to how much energy you can store in a battery. But even by 2050, not 100% of our service blocks or the service that we provide to the community is achievable if we think we're only going to charge at our Pattison base. So really, we're looking at the columns to the left with depot and on route charging, or battery electric buses that are depot charged mixed with fuel cell, or looking at fuel cell. So the first line is fleet replacement. The second line is fuel or energy costs. And I have the fuel cell cost highlighted, $100 million over the time period. The hope is that through some of the effort with the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub that was awarded by the Department of Energy, and all the investments that are going to be going into hydrogen production across the country, really, but there are some big projects planned for that hub over the next several years, that those prices will go down. DOE's effort with the hub and some other work that they're doing across the country is all intended to drive the cost of production and therefore, sale of hydrogen down. Somewhere we believe, or CTE and our consultant team believes, that somewhere in the range of 30% lower than what we see today. So continue going down the chart. Maintenance costs don't change too much depending on the technology. The maintenance costs for fuel cell do include a midlife fuel cell rebuild, for lack of a better term, where some of the components in there might need to be replaced. There haven't been any in service long enough to really know that for sure, but there's an assumption there. And then battery replacement, you might be wondering, in any of the battery electric buses, most of the bus manufacturers are including an optional warranty, like a 12-year warranty, which is the minimum life of a bus, in the purchase price. So that's included in the purchase price line there. And then infrastructure is pretty significant. And this is where the effort and cost in the chart on the left comes in. In deploying charging on our base for the full fleet, plus charging out on our routes would be significant. These costs do not include, especially for on-route charging, if we needed to acquire any property to install the charging equipment on, and they also don't include any of the upgrades that would be required for power capabilities by Puget Sound Energy. And we think those, just the energy upgrade costs would be in the several millions in addition to what we're looking at here. So total baseline is significant. And what we've heard across the board, there were some early assumptions that deploying zero emission buses, because you're not using fuel, you don't need to change oil, some of the other maintenance practices are different. And electricity is cheaper than diesel, where that, changing to a zero emission fleet would save you money. But deploying a zero emission fleet, and what we've seen across the country is, there's more investment. We're changing the way that we do business with vehicles. So most fleets have fueling capabilities already built onto their property or ways to do that. Now we're changing that. This is like a generational shift in how we provide transportation. So it's all new infrastructure. The vehicles are more expensive, and it's a cost consideration that we really need to look at. The other thing that's not included in any of the battery electric is any plans for resiliency, backup generation, dedicated service lines from the utility, and the like. So another view we wanted to have was, what do our cumulative emissions look like over this time period, today through 2050? And these are all the different, I'd say, fuel choices that we looked at, anywhere from, our baseline, which is a straight line up, because we continue to burn fuel every year, and emissions pile on top of each other. The story here is the sooner we can flatten the curve and get to zero, the better. And there are multiple options that will get us there down the road as we replace our fleet with zero emission vehicles and get the infrastructure implemented. And both of those, either way, it's possible to accomplish this with either of the two main technologies that we're looking at. Some just happen sooner than others, but it's also still contingent on availability of that energy. So we've done the analysis. We have a lot of information. We spent a whole day, our consultant team with our board members, going through the more detailed results. We looked at the entire fleet and broke it up into the segments of service that we provide: our fixed route buses, our die-lift buses, our van pool vehicles, and all of our non-revenue fleet, which is the vehicles we use to support the service out there. And we think we know where we're going, but there are still some big question marks. I will share, as we were going through this analysis, we did apply for a couple of grants through Washington State Department of Transportation. and were awarded last summer. Combined, the two grants that we were awarded are approximately $13 million, which will allow us to buy and put on the road up to 5 fuel cell buses, install some temporary fueling equipment so that we can test them out before we, full-blown commit to the big infrastructure that would be required to run our fleet. And we'll be able to upgrade our maintenance facility so that we can work on hydrogen powered vehicles in the shop safely. We've looked at, with our partners, as many of you are aware, our site is under construction. We erected a few new buildings that we took possession of last year, and are today working on rehabilitation of the rest of our site, including the maintenance shop. And so we asked our consultant to help us figure out where we might be able to fit in this temporary fueling. So we've got we've done some work here, and we think we know roughly what it's going to cost and what the space considerations are. And that's primarily what this slide is for. And today there are 2 options for getting hydrogen delivered. So both of these options are considering delivery, not on-site production. And that's in a gaseous form, which would be compressed gases, people call them large tube trailers, or liquid hydrogen, which has to be chilled to get it to liquefy, and then you can transport it in greater quantities and store it in greater quantities. But different equipment is needed for either option. And I would love to, but I'm not quite ready to share what our full fleet transition recommendation looks like. We will be sharing that with our authority board on the 17th of January, a more detailed picture of what our recommendations look like, but it will include the fuel cell grant project. And then starting in potentially 26 and beyond, we're going to be looking at some additional technologies, testing other technologies, and beginning to plan for infrastructure projects. But really, our approach is we want to do this fuel cell project. We want to do some other small scale testing of other technologies, and then wait a little bit longer, but get some experience under our belt with the different types of vehicles. And then beginning in 2031, where our newest buses are due for replacement, really begin then with kind of a faster scale replacement of our diesel vehicles with zero emissions of one technology or another. So phase 2 of our project with CTE is to take the analysis information and the recommendations that we're going to share with our board and begin creating our official transition plan, which for some of the FTA monies that are out there, an official transition plan is a requirement of the grant applications. So we need to get that done to be looking for those funding opportunities. And we'll also be looking at our change management plans. And then phase 3, which is happening concurrently, we've asked CTE and our partners to help us with the implementation of our fuel cell grant demonstration projects. And then we're also going to be working probably starting in 25, 26 on revisiting our site master plan to include whatever technology or technologies that we think will be deploying long-term for the rest of our fleet. And that's all I have for you. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Let's share your screen. Are there any questions? Tracy?
Thank you, Andy. Hey, I'm curious. You had a slide back there that was showing the two different types of vehicles, and one of the things in there was a DC to DC converter. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Explain what that means to convert DC power to DC power. There you go. On the left side there, the DC to the DC converter.
Oh, that's on board the vehicle. Because the energy coming out of the fuel cell needs to be, I don't know all the technical details behind it. It needs to be conditioned a little bit before it charges the batteries and brought up to the right level so that it can replenish the batteries.
So it's probably like higher direct current converter.
Yeah. It's like going from low to high current DC.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm also curious, is there, there's a lot of big numbers out there in your proposal. I'm curious if we have funding, if you already have existing funding programmed for that, or is this going to be an ask for additional sales tax?
We're hoping, and Emily might want to chime in here too, that we don't have to ask for additional sales tax from our community in order to get this done. We'll be looking for, other grant funding to supplement what we have. For our current budget and capital improvement plan, we did include the vehicle costs for the next 5 years, and we'll be looking at how to fund that without putting the burden on, the communities that we provide the service to.
Thanks, John.
And Tracy, I would just add that that really our commitment to sustainability is about making sure that we're not, impacting the community at any great length either. Our grants program administrator, Jessica Gould, is also on this call, and she's very, very effective at helping us find grant dollars. So that's really our goal, so that we really minimize any type of impact to the community, because you're correct, this is very costly, not only technology, but infrastructure. And it's part of the reason why we take making this choice so seriously is, we just want to make sure that we're being responsible.
Yeah, that one of the biggest considerations and why our recommendation in 2019 and 2021 was to wait is we didn't feel it was responsible to use taxpayer money to buy more expensive vehicles that don't actually meet our service needs, right? For the sake of doing the latest and greatest thing. We want to make sure that's why our priority is providing the service that we provide and finding a technology that works versus reworking our service. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Are there any other questions?
I see Pete.
Okay, Pete. Can you
first of all, Jonathan, thank you. You can drop your shared screen, I think, at this point. First of all, just thank you for that excellent presentation. I learned a lot in just a few minutes here. And I hope you will share your knowledge and information with our public works staff who are also looking at transitioning our fleets. This is great information that I think would be important for them to hear. Just a couple of comments. I wondered if you had considered, I've been reading about this induction charging, where a vehicle could drive over essentially coils in the road, I think, and charge up. If that was something that you looked at, and whether that's reaching a point where it may be something that we should be thinking about. And then in terms of resiliency, I think this storm, just put an exclamation point on that. One of the things that I've noticed is that, in areas where we bury power lines, they tend not to have the problems. And I think, and also, of course, there are opportunities near substations where there's a limited distance between, essentially the source of the power and where it's used. I think we should be factoring that into our discussion more over time here.
Yeah.
Anyway.
totally agree. And to your first point, I would love to share this with our peers in the community, you know, your jurisdictions and the folks involved in looking at this for your organizations. Absolutely. And on the resilience piece, you know, we've what I didn't share is for the last year and a half, we've been meeting regularly with some folks at PSE, Puget Sound Energy, to talk about what this might look like, what the grid capabilities are, what options we have. And certainly there are options for them helping us with the resiliency path. Most include probably a dedicated line, potentially a dedicated substation at our facility. And so there are ways to get there, but those are additional costs that we haven't gone down the road to really quantify them, but they are significant. And I'd say if we're talking substation and or dedicated feeder, you know, we're in the $10 million range in order to upgrade the system for that. And the reason we look at hydrogen is really, as long as we could get the fuel to the site, it's similar to diesel. We need a small generator to power the compressors and the dispensing equipment. Mm-hmm. The fuel is available, and that's why that and the range are the two main points that make it attractive as a solution. So thank you.
Wayne, I see you. Wayne, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate all your planning on improving your fleet. But as my first day as a member of the Transportation Policy Board and the newly elected commissioner for District 4, I just want to say that I'd love to also talk about expanded services, because intercity transit doesn't serve probably about 90% of the largest commissioner district in Thurston County. So maybe in the next year we can talk about that as well. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, real quick, just something's been running through my mind. We've got two different forms of fuel that you're looking at right now. As a county, are we going to pick one and be unified on that one, or are we going to be fragmented out where some places might have the hydrogen, some places might just have electric? I think it would be better in the long run if we choose one, figure out which is going to be better and which is going to be more adaptable to future technology, than to just say, you know, then not to do something along those lines, because eventually we're going to have to upgrade and all that kind of stuff. And if we've got two different systems, it's going to be really expensive to start upgrading stuff.
I guess that's I think a point that John's trying to make here is the other major transportation systems, right? The school districts, they have huge fleets. Have you talked to them at all on which way they're leaning on this, and can we have some collaboration and coordination with them, and did that maybe bring down costs somehow?
It could. The difference specifically between school districts and transit are our vehicle duty cycle. So you imagine morning pickup, afternoon, you know, pickup and drop off. They generally have more time to charge, and they don't have as far that we go. I mean, some of our routes are Tacoma runs, or runs to Yelm and back. Those buses run upward of 300 miles a day, and 16 hours on the road, which is very different than the duty cycle of a school bus. And one thing I've learned as we've delved down this path and looking at different technologies and capabilities and applications is, while it does make sense, and it may make sense regionally to look at, collaborating and combining or sharing costs and investing in different solutions. I think the two primary that are going to continue forward are battery electric, which is just using energy from the grid or other sources, and hydrogen, because there are a lot of cases where battery electric vehicles in general, different types of vehicles, make a lot of sense. and are functional for different fleets or different types of operations. And some where long haul trucking, for example, where, we believe fuel cell makes a lot more sense because it's a lot more, you can get farther, it takes less time to fuel. And so really I see it going forward as more a case by case basis, but generally it's going to be either battery electric or fuel cell is what we're going to see for zero emissions going forward. So as long as there's some collaboration, and the Northwest Hydrogen Hub being awarded gives me great hope in that we'll have major suppliers, producers of hydrogen within our state or within the Northwest region. And so we won't have to truck it from today. We would have to get our hydrogen from some other state, likely California being the closest, or Canada, on diesel trucks, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but it might be what we need to do for the short term until there's some local supply. And we have had conversations with other organizations around in our county that are looking at hydrogen, either production and or use. And so there's definitely potential there for some teamwork on this within our community.
When is the hydrogen plant hopefully going to be built in Washington?
Well, there's one, I think it's operational or almost operational, and they're looking at expanding it in Douglas County at the PUD there. And then I know Lewis County Transit is working toward a small electrolyzer to produce, and we're talking about sharing some of that until they get up to where they're using all of it. They're also building a commercial station. And then there are 2 or 3 other larger production projects with private suppliers that are in the works now, either in property acquisition and or planning. And they hope to be operational by 2027, 2028. So I don't think it's too far out. And at least 2 of those projects are not contingent on the DOE Hydrogen Hub money. They're proceeding on their own because they see the demand coming for this. So I think in the next decade, we'll see some changes. And that's part of why our delay and waiting until 2030 or just a couple of years before 2030 to see how all that develops before we really lock into one technology or the other and start investing in that infrastructure.
Got it. Okay. Well, does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, just one real quick. Are you guys setting aside monies from now until then so that when you decide which way you're going to go, you already have that bucket?
Yes, that's why I mentioned we've already included zero emissions costs in our 5-year CIP, and we'll continue doing that going forward so that we can start building that bank account and be ready when we're ready to go. That, in addition to grant funding that we hope will continue to be available, will help us.
And just so if anyone's interested, our capital improvement plan is on our website if you're curious at all. So our Chief Financial Officer, Jana Brown, did a great job of putting that together for us. So.
Right. Don't see any other hands up. So with that, we have reached the end of our agenda. So without objection, I'll call this meeting adjourned.
Non-debatable motion.
Thanks, everyone.
Y'all have a good day. Happy New Year.